Welcome to the Sourcing Hero podcast, produced by Una, a group purchasing organization that empowers sourcing heroes, and Art of Procurement, the world's largest procurement podcast network. I'm your host, Kelly Barnard. The goal of the Sourcing Hero podcast is to capture the epic stories of people who are rising up and beating the odds to create exceptional value within procurement, directly from those heroes themselves. Today, my guest here on the Sourcing Hero podcast is Marcia Williams. Marcia is a Forbes Contributor, founder and managing partner of USM Supply Chain Consulting, and the author of multiple books, the most recent of which is Scaling Supply Chains with Maria, Financial and Operational Frameworks and Analysis for Massive, Profitable Growth. So, hi, Marcia, how are you?
Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, I shared a little bit about your background and certainly your book, which we'll get to in my intro. But what else should people know about your professional journey to this point?
Sure. I have been in supply chain and procurement for 18 years, and I love it, even during COVID and after COVID. My bachelor's degree is in accounting, and I have an MBA from Michigan State. And since then, I had amazing opportunities like consulting engagement with Cody, that is the third largest beauty company, Lindt Chocolate and Hershey. And as you can note, my accent is not from New York because I'm originally from Uruguay, that is a tiny country in South America.
Well, fortunately, chocolate is the universal language. We can all appreciate a supply chain experience built on chocolate.
I know.
And it's interesting because your book, which I have, is trying to think, how would you describe it? So it's sort of like part storytelling, right? There's characters, it's sort of a living case study, but it's also very instructional. How do you usually explain to people what kind of a book Supply Chains with Maria is?
Yes, it's as you mentioned, Kelly. Is I wrote the books in a different way. I use fictional companies with characters and stories, and the idea behind all of this is to make complex concepts like finance, supply chain concept simple to understand. And everything started with my work with clients because when I would like to present a suggestion, I create an explainer video, those 2D videos. So there I have the challenge that we are facing, the team members that are the characters, and the story. The story is how we came up with that solution. So I included all of that in my writing.
Interesting. Now, one of the ideas that I picked up on from the book is what you call goal trees. So, can you share what are goal trees and what do they offer to supply chain teams?
Yes, of course, and that is a great question. The first time that I heard about gold trees was during my time at Cummins. That Cummins is a manufacturing company, engine company, and when I was an intern, and everyone was talking about the gold tree, so it looked important to me. And what a gold tree does is to ensure alignment from different functions, project, activities. So we start with the strategy. Let's say that we want to become the lowest cost provider, maybe like Walmart has as a strategy. Then we define the financial metrics accordingly. So we probably have some metrics related to cost, to COGS and cost and also to gross margin. But now, how do we get to those metrics? And here is where supply chain and procurement come into play, right? Because we will define projects to achieve those targets. So everything is in alignment. And I think this concept is fundamental, in particular when companies experience exponential growth, to keep everyone aligned, because as a regular tree, then we have more branches, and we need to check, we need to trim and focus on the key activities that all of them are aligned to the financial metrics as well as the strategy.
Now, one of the other things that you include in the book is Six Sigma. And that's something that lean manufacturing professionals, I'm sure, already know about. But a lot of, especially operational supply chain and procurement professionals, may not be as familiar. What role can Six Sigma play in supply chain management?
Yes, the role of Six Sigma, as I see in supply chain and procurement, has impact on three key aspects. The first one is to prioritize based on the impact. So that is a key point. The second point is that it helps us to quantify. And the third one that is related to the concept of goal trees is that Six Sigma helps us to achieve alignment. So we can see this more in a practical way. We start defining our problem in a statistical form and defining our baseline. For example, if we are in supply chain, we say, okay, we want to reduce the late customer deliveries from 15% to 10%, or reduce the time for purchase requisition approval by 5%. We need to use numbers to quantify our goal, because in an example of our personal life, we can say, I want to reduce my weight, but if I lower an ounce or two, it's not what we want, right? So it's very important to be specific and quantify. So once we have that, we can apply the different Six Sigma tools, like the different matrices, like cause and effect matrix, failure mode and effect analysis, like the FMEA. So it will help us to prioritize. So then we work only on those factors that have the largest impact. We implement, and then we measure again. And we can see if we have accomplished our objective or if we need to make some changes. So that's why I think Six Sigma is a great framework. You can also think about procurement when we need to evaluate suppliers. We can use the PEW concept and have the criteria defined, different team members to score, and in that way we have more objectivity, like we are more objective when we assess the responses from suppliers. So actually, I think Six Sigma we can even apply to our personal lives.
You must be better at Six Sigma than me. I think that would take a lot of my brain attempting to do that. And yet I can see what you're saying about how it applies, including one of the other things you mentioned in there, which is financial metrics. And this is another one of those areas where you really go into depth in the book, and an area that for many procurement and supply chain professionals may be either a little bit of a blind spot or maybe just something they've been away from since they left undergrad or business school. Are there a couple of financial metrics that stand out to you as being particularly effective when applied within managing the supply chain?
Yes, I think one of them is related to inventory turnover. For us, inventory is critical, so we need to understand that metric more because of the impact. We saw during COVID that we had material shortages.
Yes.
And then after COVID, we have excess inventory. We saw it with Nike, with many other major retailers. So that is one key metric. Another one is cash to cash cycle, because in that way we need to think about, okay, I am investing this in inventory, and then this is the moment that we get cash from the customer. So I think those two key metrics are very helpful for supply chain and procurement, and we have a huge impact on them.
Now, that's sort of the impact of finance on paper or on spreadsheets. Let's say we're living in a digital world. I shouldn't say on paper. When I think about the relationship between either supply chain and finance or procurement and finance, especially in the procurement area, there's a little bit of a history of tension there. We're always trying to say we saved this much, and finance is saying, well, show it to me. Where is it in the financial statements? Do you have any advice either around communication or straightforward relationship building, maybe around shared interests, that could help procurement and supply chain professionals do a better job of working with our counterparts in finance?
Yes, my suggestion is that in supply chain and procurement, many times, like for example with planning, we tend to think about physical units. So one of the key aspect is to show finance with monetary units, and also to understand what concept and statement they are managing. I think we are more prepared if we understand like the key sections, for example, of the balance sheet, the income statement, cash flows, and coming back to the goal tree, we need to understand the metrics, how they are tracking those metrics, the sources of information. So if we start with changing our language and also our thoughts, instead of saying, for example, yes, we expedited this shipment, but in financial terms, we can say, yes, we expedited this shipment that implies an increase in operational expenses, but we will see revenue, and that revenue we will cash in next quarter. So start talking more about the language of finance and see where in those statements our actions are having impact. That is one suggestion. And another one is to participate in the meetings with finance.
Yeah.
So in that way, we know what they think, we know more about their planning, and we start getting our actions aligned. So I think those two key aspects are helpful for supply chain and procurement, because I know that there's some tension. Another suggestion is like to include the assumptions, right? Because in the example that you mentioned, Kelly, sometimes, yes, we present the savings and they say, okay, I don't see anything of those savings. It can be like with impressions in film. And that can happen because we use for the calculations a certain quantity order, and then we need to take certain quantity break, right? That is different than maybe from what is happening now. So it's important also to mention any assumptions and backup calculation for the savings.
Now, one of the other questions I want to ask about your book, and I'm actually holding it. I grabbed it and picked it up and opened to a random page, partially to make the point that, you really do go the extra mile in terms of making this a readable story. I mean, everything is very realistic, but there are individual characters in here. And, whether we're looking at Amy or Mike or Ruben, all these different characters, we've all worked with Amy's and Mike's and Ruben's, right? As part of your creative process, do you maybe pick up personality traits or character traits from people in your family, people in your friend group, people at the office, or that you've worked with in the past? Do they find their way into the book, or do you draw your inspiration from elsewhere?
All the characters are based like on my experience. Of course, there are some that I added other characteristics that or I focus more on some aspect to make them funnier or to illustrate the point better. But this is real, right? Is what
Yes.
there are not of course the characters are not persons, but I take some aspect from different ones, so it's a mix, and it's something that all of us also we can see as reflected in somewhat in those characters, because I'm not going to say that yes, I'm always positive about the change. So yes, it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah. And you just never know. If you decide to add to the series, there could be a brave and heroic procurement podcaster that just inspires the team to get in there and learn their financial metrics and invest in their goal trees. But we won't draw any assumptions about where maybe the inspiration for that character might have come from. Marcia, before I let you go, I want to ask you, this is sort of a tradition here at the Sourcing Hero. Every guest who joins me gets a pair of questions, and I'll share them for anybody who happens to be listening and it's new, but you can pick either one of these questions, and there is no such thing as a wrong answer. So your choices are, what does the idea of a sourcing hero mean to you? Or what does heroism look like in a business context?
Okay. I will answer sourcing hero, the
Okay.
meaning, the idea of a sourcing hero. I think a sourcing hero is someone that challenges the current situation, that asks questions to get great input. And I see that a person like following Six Sigma. So in that way, the sourcing hero can identify what is the essential and what is noise. Based on that, then the sourcing hero will take focused action. So that's how I see how a sourcing hero is. And I based all of this in a book that I think is very inspirational, that is called Essentialism, the Disciplined Pursuit of Less. So I think that is a sourcing hero for me.
And that's a great recommendation, because nothing in the world makes a good writer like a good reader. So Marcia, if people have joined us for this conversation and they would like to connect with you, or they would like to learn more about your books, what is the best way for them to get in touch?
I am on LinkedIn. So I am there, and also through my website, that is usmsupplychain.com.
Excellent. Well, Marcia, thank you so much for being here with me on the Sourcing Hero podcast.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast. Join us again next time for more true stories of sourcing and business heroism performed by your colleagues and peers. Look for the Sourcing Hero wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe. Finally, don't forget, sourcing heroism is taking place all around us every day. Keep your eyes open and you're bound to see it. Until next time, I'm your host, Kelly Barner. Stay well, and always remember that you can be a hero too.